Hey folks, welcome to the Wealth Transfer with TC. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys a prophetic dream concerning the future state of the United States and some things are going to be going on throughout the world over the next several years that I think that are very important for the wealth transfer community to know and how to prepare yourself. Now, folks, before I get started, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just sharing information, giving you my thoughts and my opinions on that information. And if you guys like these videos that I make, the support links are down below in the description and also in the About section. Now, folks, there's some things I need to clear up about the wealth transfer. Once you immerse yourself in learning how to trade and learning things about the stock market and the crypto markets, you start learning about cycles and you're learning about political and other events that could have an effect on the stock market. You know, I'm just going to give a couple examples, but like in 1929, 2007, 2008, 2020, and these three major time periods where if you invested at the bottom, you became a multimillionaire. And the difference is that the wealth transfer community is basically standing somewhat together, right? There are different groups out there, and we're all sharing dreams and visions of what God is trying to show us dealing with the wealth transfer. And that is the difference, is that these events that are going to happen with the stock market, these events that are going to happen with the cryptocurrency markets are going to happen. The difference is that God is showing us how to take advantage of it, not just for gain and riches for ourselves so we can go out and buy Lamborghinis and buy, $10 million mansions and so forth, but it's for God's kingdom and the building of God's kingdom. And we are headed into a time period as Joseph in Egypt. And that's one of the main purposes of the wealth transfer, is to build up your storehouse, not just for yourself, but for your family, for your friends, maybe for your community, for your city, but also to build the kingdom of God, to preach the word of God. And so I'm sharing these events. I'm sharing these different prophetic dreams that go along the line with other people that are having those prophetic dreams. I've shared with you guys about the food shortages over and over and over and over again, and how there's a massive food shortage coming. And I've been trying to share with you guys that we need to be prepared for that. And it's already happening in other places. And if people maybe would have taken heed to what happened in 2020 with the virus and the slowing down of the supply chain and all that, right? And it had an effect on food, and how fuel prices are having an effect on food. And that was just a taste of what's to come. So this is a warning about preparing. Don't think that when you get these riches that you're going to be the life of the party, and you're going to be driving around in your Lamborghini, and you're going to be in your $10 million home. You're going to be putting a target on your back. With all these different prophetic voices, when I line them up together, when I go back to the past, I'm talking about years, and look at the present in the dreams and visions that are currently happening, folks, I don't think we're going to go back to any type of normalcy for a while. And there is a difference in what the prophets that I'm sharing with you guys, and not just the prophets, but the dreamers, the everyday people that God does talk to. Then there is the ones that are prophesying the return of DJT all the time, and they're always wrong, and they're not telling you to prepare. They're telling you that everything's going to be all right. They're telling you that God has not showed them there's a food shortage. He's telling you that Trump is going to be restored, and all the bad guys are going to go to jail, and everything's going to be okay. And those are the people that are going to take you down the wrong path. You see, there are different countries that are falling apart, and it's just a matter of time before things get bad here. So I want to go ahead and get into this. All right, so this is Chris Reed. The link to this full video will be down below in the description. I have another video that I'm doing from one of his other prophecies that I think is very important that I'm going to go over. But people need to really understand what's coming ahead, in that you have two main groups of prophets, that one is saying one thing and one is saying another. And you're going to see the difference. And for those of you who keep following the Julie Greens and all those, you guys are going to be led down a path of destruction. I'm telling you that right now. This is the video before me. I'm going to go ahead and play it, and there's going to be at certain points I'm going to stop and talk and go over some of the things that he is saying as each tear in the $50 bill happens and discuss some of my thoughts dealing with this.
Well, welcome to Prophetic Perspectives, where we look at current events through the lens of the Word of God and through the prophetic. I am Chris Reed, coming here from Morning Star Ministries out of Fort Mill, South Carolina. Well, I have something really important to share with you today. I've shared it with our team here and shared it with a few others, but I believe I had probably one of the most vivid, detailed dreams that I believe is from the Lord regarding an unfolding of events from this point forward. And I and my family, or my family and I, were up in Moravian Falls recently, and while I was there, I had this dream. So I want to share this with you, and I pray that you'll consider sharing this with your friends, telling other people about this, because I believe this is a dream from the Lord and is something that we really need to take heed as a warning to prepare. So this is the dream. I'll just read it to you. I had this dream on early morning, March 25th, 2022. And in the dream, I saw an unknown man who was dressed in a black suit, and he held a $50 US bill in his hand. And the dream consisted of him tearing the $50 bill in 3 different stages. And after each stage, I was handed by random people who came up to me to hand me newspapers, national newspapers here in the United States, with various unique headlines. So he stands in front of me and he takes the $50 bill, and the first tear, he tears off 1/3 of the $50 bill. And when he did, this is when people started coming up to me, bringing me national newspapers, one right after the other, with headlines that I could all read and were very vivid in my memory. And as soon as, of course, I woke up, I wrote this down. But the first one said, after he tore the $50 bill 1/3 off, the headline read this: "The dollar drops 30% in value." And a subtitle to the headline was, "Mideast Oil Strikes Deal with China Instead of the U.S." I then was given another headline which said, quote, "The Perfect Storm," unquote, subtitled, "Inflation Reaches a New High." And then another person came up to me and handed me another news headline, which said, quote, "Food Shortage Crisis as Wheat and Bread Imports Are at a Stalemate," unquote. Another headline was then handed to me which said something like, quote, "Riots and Civil Unrest as Citizens Demand Entitlement Checks," unquote. Now this was the only headline that I couldn't remember the exact wording of, but what I shared was close to it. Then in the dream, the attention was brought back on the man dressed in the black suit who held the $50 bill.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and stop it right there. The first thing is he talked about the dollar dropping 30% in value, right? And we've already had that since Biden took office, right? Because inflation went up, gas prices went up, food, price of cars and vehicles, housing went up, rents were being raised. So many different areas of our economy became a lot more expensive. And actually, we've dropped more than 30% in value. Mideast oil strikes deal with China, right? Not the United States. And we've already been seeing that. If you guys remember when Biden went over to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and he made the United States and himself look like a really big fool. All right, and we already know that the Middle East is already joining up with Russia and China and other nations that do not like the United States. So as far as anything majorly, I think that we are going to go back to seeing gas prices go back up again. And we've already been seeing that, but you're going to see it dramatically. Inflation reaches a new high. Now, I know that Christopher Harris had some prophetic dreams dealing with the gas and also inflation and hyperinflation. So there's some things that I believe that we're going to be seeing in the next few months, especially keep your eye on April, the month of April, and I'll get into that in another video. But everybody thinks inflation is going to go back down, and prophetically speaking, I believe that it's going to go back up, and you're going to see some hits coming to the economy, to the stock market, and so on here very soon. Then he also talked about food shortage crisis. Now, folks, I have been sharing with you guys for the longest time about food shortages. When I worked at the grocery store, I told you guys about all the issues, and that was just dealing with the pandemic. What do you think is going to happen when China attacks Taiwan? What do you think is going to happen when the war in Ukraine escalates? What do you think is going to happen to the supply chain in general? And what about the food supply chain? There is a preparation for now and a preparation for the long term. Okay, and here's just a bunch of different dreams from various people about food shortages, right? In the very long term, people are going to be putting together their own gardens and growing their own food, right? There's articles here that dealing with Biden warns of real food shortage following sanctions on Iran, right? Here's a more recent article about food shortages are starting to become quite serious all over the planet. Folks, this is a real thing. And so people should be preparing themselves now. I know some of you are waiting for God to bless us, and that's why I say that when you see your investments in this next bull run, whether it's the small bull run or the big bull run, to make sure that you're taking profits. If you see an investment go up that you're in, make sure you take profits so that you can prepare yourself for the short-term crisis and also the long and eventually to be the groundwork that you lay down for the long-term crisis. And so this is the thing that a lot of these other prophets are not telling you to do. So then he talks about riots and civil unrest as citizens demand entitlement checks. Now, of course, I'm a big advocate of talking about how at least one side of the political spectrum keeps promising people, a group of people, reparations every election cycle. And they're starting it up again where they're talking about giving reparations, and they're going to use it to get people to go out and march in the streets. And that's why you always see this race chaos going on right now. And so people are going to be demanding food stamps. People are going to be demanding money to pay their bills, right? People are going to be demanding monthly checks for not doing anything, right? People who, and these are going to be people who normally don't get anything, right? Because if you're already getting it, you're not going to be out in the streets protesting. So there's this perfect storm of inflation, right? As he was saying, that's going to cause a lot of these other issues. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next part of the prophetic dream.
Then in the dream, the attention was brought back on the man dressed in the black suit who held the $50 bill. This time he tore the $50 bill in half. And when he did this, an earthquake happened under my feet. Another person walked up to me and handed me a headline which read, quote, Israeli and Palestinian two-state solution reached, unquote. And then another person came up to me and gave me a headline which said, quote, Major earthquake hits the middle of the U.S., unquote. Then the man in the black suit took the rest of the $50 bill and he started tearing it in smaller pieces. So the first time he tore off 1/3. The second man in the black suit took the rest of me and gave me a headline which said, quote, Major earthquake hits the middle of the U.S.
So the prophecies that he gave concerning this next tearing of the $50 bill. So there's the $50 bill. He tore it once, a third of it, and then he split the other one in half, which is another third that he tore off. And he said there was an earthquake beneath his feet. Now, I believe that his ministry is located in South Carolina. If not, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he will experience this earthquake, or there'll be an earthquake in South Carolina. But he said that the Israel-Palestinian two-state solution reached. Doesn't mean that it's going to go through. Just saying that they agreed probably on this. And this is going to be scary for a lot of people. You're going to hear about the rapture talk, the Antichrist talk, and all that stuff. And one of the things that people need to understand, not very many people get this, and they continue to listen to lies concerning like the rapture and so forth. In order for the Antichrist to commit the abomination of desolation, in order for him to try to stop the sacrifices, the third temple has to be built. When you see the temple being built, the third temple, is when you should be really worried about what's to come. Now, he said a major earthquake hits the middle of the U.S. And that's very interesting because I've heard in the past prophecies concerning that when this two-state solution deal is reached, that there's going to be a splitting of the United States. But here on GodTube, I found this video, prophecies that America will be split by a huge earthquake when it betrays Israel. Right, here are 3 prophecies that agree with each other about the new Madrid earthquake that will split America when America betrays Israel. In this one, they go over 3 prophecies about America being split by an earthquake. So I don't know if he's referring to the same earthquake and whether or not if this deal is actually going to be reached. You know, those are all things that we have to look at, right? Because a deal might be reached, whether or not they sign it is going to be a whole nother thing. And a lot of people are going to be looking at this agreement. You know, is it for 7 years? What kind, you know, who's going to be involved in making this happen? Now, one of the things that people are going to be saying, oh, it's the rapture is getting ready to happen, you know, the pre-trib and all this stuff, right? But, you know, one thing that people have to understand before I go any further is that when it comes to the rapture, and this was dealt with in Thessalonians, where Paul said, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that you may not be shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit or by word, nor by letter as from us, as the day of the Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for the day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So one of the things that people don't understand is that the third temple has to be built in order for the Antichrist to go in, declare himself God, and to try to stop the sacrifices. The sacrifices have to be going in order for him to try to stop the sacrifices. So even here, he's saying that he's going to sit in the temple of God, showing that he is himself God. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions about the rapture, whether it's pre-trib, mid-trib, and all that stuff. That really doesn't matter. What matters is that the man of sin is going to be revealed first before it comes. One of the things that's interesting is that there's this video that's 7 years old, and it deals with 3 prophecies that America will be split by a huge earthquake when it betrays Israel. Many of you probably heard this way back in the day, right? I know I did. That's why when I heard this prophecy from Chris Reed, I said, you know what? I've heard this prophecy before. This particular video from GodTube, right? I could put the link down below in the description, but there's 3 prophecies that deal with America being split or torn in half. We saw what happened in Turkey, all these Grand Canyons being created in Turkey because of the earthquake. So you're going to see America split by 2. Could you imagine being here during that time period and seeing that, where the earthquake happens and it splits and people just being sucked into where America's being split at? So I'm not going to play this video or anything, but you should watch these prophecies concerning this event. And if I can find the other one, I'll put that down below in the description as well. And so this is going to be a very pivotal moment in time. And that's why with this wealth transfer, we're preparing for the worst, for these things to come down the road in the future, and that we can use our storehouses and use the finances that we have to preach the gospel before the rapture does occur. All right, so we will go ahead and continue to the next tearing of the bill.
Then the man in the black suit took the rest of the $50 bill and he started tearing it in smaller pieces. So the first time he tore off 1/3. The second time he tore off half of the $50 bill. And now he takes the rest of the $50 bill and tears off in small pieces, one by one. And then another person walks up to me and hands me another headline which read, quote, "America in Pieces," unquote. And it was subtitled as this, quote, "More states secede from the nation in rebellion to the federal government," unquote. I was then handed another headline. Another person came up and handed me a headline which said, quote, "U.S. military takes charge as uncertainty looms over the federal government," unquote.
The other piece of the $50 bill, the last piece, it was broken up into smaller pieces. So the headline read, "America in Pieces, more states secede from nation in rebellion from the federal government, and the U.S. military takes charge." And I can see that actually taking place. And so a couple thoughts that came to mind. And I can see like Republican states seceding from the United States, say for instance, over the First and Second Amendment, right? If they were to all of a sudden say, hey, we're shutting down your Second Amendment rights, we're shutting down your First Amendment rights, and we can actually see that take place. On the flip side of that is maybe even Democrats doing that, because what if Trump is restored or he wins the election in 2024? How many Democratic states would rebel and succeed because they don't want him as president, right? So I could see that happening on both sides. Well, the interesting thing is that today, Marjorie Taylor Greene suggested that we need a national divorce here in this tweet. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this. From the sick and disgusting woke culture issues shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous America's last policies, we are done. So she is suggesting that Republican states need to break away.
Then the man dressed in the black suit took out a new dollar bill. It was not the $50 bill. It was a $1 U.S. bill. But what was interesting about it was in the dream, the $1 bill looked like a cell phone. It was a $1 bill, but it looked like a cell phone. I did see George Washington's face on it, but it looked very different than a normal $1 bill. And I remember looking at it and just studying it and was kind of, pondering why this $1 bill looked like a cell phone. And when I am pondering this, another person comes up, hands me another headline, and the newspaper headlines read, quote, "New currency for a renewed nation," unquote. Another headline was handed to me and it said, quote, "Simplicity restored as Americans grow their own food again," unquote.
Very interesting about the new dollar bill. So he's saying that is coming, but we're going to have to go through all these things with states talking about or actually seceding from the United States. That might be something real, folks. So you might even pray about where you're going to live at in the future. Because if it gets this chaotic, and I'm going to share a dream from Drew Wyatt again about what he said about this, because I believe his dream is connected to Christopher Reed's dream. And I guarantee only some of you know what dream I'm talking about. So new currency for a renewed nation. So something is going to happen. Obviously, there's going to be somebody in leadership that's going to bring everything back together again. and simplicity restored as Americans grow their own food. That's what I've been talking about, folks, lately, especially if you're on the Patreon or in the Discord. We're talking about those things. And it's not an easy task to grow your own garden. Okay, people think, oh yeah, I just throw some seeds down and everything grows. No, there's so many elements that that you have to look out for. You just can't turn your lawn into a garden all of a sudden. It doesn't work that easy. For me, I'm just going to pay somebody to help me out. But that's a very real thing. And those are things that we have discussed with previous prophets like Joshua Giles and Tomi Orami. And they're saying the same thing, which is different from what all these other prophets are talking about. So when he talked about the dollar bill, it looked like a cell phone. That reminds me digital dollar. We know that's coming anyway, but somehow, some way, it's going to be a part of this new system, a new dollar bill, and you're probably going to see the old money go away, right? So at some point, you're going to see all the old dollar bills and $100 bills and $50 bills, they're all going to go away eventually, because they're already doing this transition in other countries where they're getting rid of their old currency and coming out with new currency. It's just a matter of time before the United States does the same thing.
And I woke up. Now, as I said, this is very vivid. I kind of want to just cover some of the main points that I feel pretty solid. As I've discussed it with my team, I feel like that we have, at least in part, a pretty good interpretation with their input. And of course, no one sees the whole picture. As the Bible says, we know in part and we prophesy in part. So I may have a part, another person may have a part, another person may have a part. When we put all the parts together, then you have a whole pie. Well, I believe that's how it is with the prophetic. I don't believe one person has the whole, but we all have our part. And the thing that about this dream that I'm pretty convinced of, as we've come out from this, discussing this, is the man in the black suit. Somebody made a statement, Johnny Cash, the country music star, was called the Man in Black. The Man in Black with the last name Cash. And then the $50 bill seemed like, to me, it represented obviously the U.S. currency in 50 states, the 50 United States, with the $50 bill. And him tearing parts of the bill in 3 stages spoke of a progressive unfolding of events of which timeline I'm not sure, but I really feel like in 2022, 2023, we're going to really begin to see these things unfold. And I've had a few confirmations of this dream since then that I believe had to be the Lord confirming this as a prophetic dream. But also in the book of Revelation, the black horse, of the 4 horsemen of the 7 seals, it was the black horse rider that dealt with money and economics and, the measure of wheat for a penny and barley for a penny, but that he could not hurt the oil and the wine, which I think that speaks of the fact that somehow believers, while preparing, while being mentally and emotionally and physically prepared, we must be aware that God is going to help his people through this time in this renewing of America. I did feel this was successful in this dream as far as how America would come through this renewed after this purging or this process of renewing. I knew that we were coming upon a time of trouble. But as I thought about this dream and the events unfolding in this dream, I can't help believe that this is something we should take serious. The headlines themselves kind of speak for themselves. And it seems as if at the end there was this release of this new currency or digital currency that was different than the kind of currency we have now. But I think we more than ever need to be prepared. Go into the store. Each time you go, even if you just buy 2 or 3 extra canned goods, each time you go to the grocery store, I think there are simple measures that we can take. because I believe we are coming upon a perfect storm as we see these events unfolding in the world. I don't believe America will be exempt from this. And I really think that we really need to be in prayer and preparation and warning people around us that although this will turn out to be successful, there's going to be some bumpy roads ahead. And I think more than ever, we need to have a prophetic perspective of current events around us.
All right, folks, so that is the end of his prophetic dream. You know, he talks about this progression and how fast is this going to happen and how fast are things going to be restored. If this happens over a 2 or 3 year period, right, that means there's going to be a lot of trouble over a short period of time. In America being in pieces, you already have Republicans calling for to secede from this federal government. When I heard what that politician said about doing that, that kind of shook me. Because it's like, well, here we are. We see this progression. And, you know, we haven't really seen the food shortage crisis yet. So these events are going to, I believe that what she was saying about succeeding from the United States federal government is a foreshadow of things to come. When we start seeing inflation and gas prices and everything go up and riots and food shortages, and then we're going to see this agreement, at least as a headline, as far as Israel and Palestine in a two-state solution, right? And then a major earthquake hit the United States, smack dab in the middle, right? There's going to be a lot of issues in the United States. There's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be prepared for that. And then we have America being in pieces and people in states wanting to succeed from the United States. And eventually America being restored with a new currency, right? And then people growing their own food. So, folks, down below in the description is going to be this document, the Inflation, Economy, Food Shortages, Gas, and Oil Prophecies, right? It's all right here. Also, too, the China, Russia invades U.S., Taiwan prophecies, because you know what, folks? China is going to invade Taiwan. There's so many prophecies out there, and, you know, even Christopher Harris had some dreams about that, too, as well. And, you know, at least in the Telegram group, I presented a couple prophecies that have come fulfilled concerning Russia and so forth. Just many other people, right? You can see all these different prophetic dreams dealing with Russia and China invading, and people think that, oh yeah, this is for, you know, down the road in the tribulation period and all that. I don't believe that all of those are for the tribulation. I believe some of those are for today. In that balloon that came across the U.S. was one of the signs that told me to say people need to start stocking up on food right now. People need to start preparing their homes to be storehouses, right? So I want you guys to look at those and watch the videos. Start watching some of the videos. I mean, to me, I could care less what's going on in this nation politically. You know, for me, I'm still learning about the stock market and cycles and learning things about that area, but I'm also watching these videos on what's going to take place and how to prepare. And I'm watching videos on how to grow my own garden, how to prepare, how to prep, and all that. I could care less what's going on with the Democrats and the Republicans right now, because in the end of all things, watching hours of that stuff a day does not benefit me in my future. You can keep up with it by looking at news articles or reading titles and so forth and see what's going on. But as far as to immerse myself in it on a daily basis, I can't do that. I have to prepare for the future. All right, folks. So this is video number 1 of Christopher Reed. I do have another video coming forth as well. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys are paying attention, and I hope you guys begin to prepare yourselves for the future. Now, I know that there's prophecies, even Kim Clement. We talk about the 7 years of good and 7 years of bad and the things that are to come. And so this is part of the preparation, right? So we're waiting on this wealth transfer. You know, what God is showing us, where to invest and what things are going to take place so that we can prepare ourselves. Anyways, folks, that is all that I have for this video. I thank you guys for listening. God bless. TC out.